And we are live. Hey, folks, it's Gene Galin here, and that's me. And then we've got Victor. We're both wearing our hats, and Victor Hensley from the Chatham Journal Record. And last year, during one of the football games, I think it was one of the games, we did a pre-game live from Northwood High School. We got hundreds of people watched it, which is Chatham County is very good, and we got good feedback on it. So we're going to try it again this year, see if this is something folks are interested in. No one else is doing it, and we're just going to, today, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a little bit of a preview of what's going on in Chatham High Schools. Now, if you folks aren't aware, sports editor for the Chatham News and Record, comes out every morning or Wednesday afternoon.
It's Wednesday morning / afternoon. Papers are usually delivered around like 10 a.m., something like that. But yeah.
Look, if you're by Wednesday afternoon, you should be out there, see it. Victor and I have talked before. If you watch coverage, pick up a paper if you want to see pictures of your kids or your friends' kids playing sports. Pick up a paper on Wednesday afternoons. It's definitely worth it. Today's agenda we're going to kick on is we're going to talk about what's going on with the high schools, take a look at all four of the high schools, including the newest one, which is Seaford High School, the first one in 50. So big happening here in Chatham County. And Victor, I think, again, we talked back last year. So what's going on here in the summertime that you've covered that you found interesting that folks in the county will want to know about?
We're having an off season. I mean, that's what we didn't have last year. We're actually teams are actually being able to get together, practice, do workouts, things like that. I mean, I've talked to, coaches from just about every single school over here in the last 3-4 weeks. And I think that's just kind of the sentiment that everybody's kind of expressing. It's just we're glad to finally be able to be together, go in the weight room, things like that. Obviously, if they go in the weight room, they're masked, have those kinds of protocols and everything going on. But I mean, overall, it's just I think everybody's excited to be together. Last year was so strange with all the sports being condensed into the spring season, and it was just wild to see no teams have really a big off season. No teams were able to really get together. Like you just heard stories of people who were having to work out individually, online, at home. It's just when you're playing a team sport, it's just hard to build that camaraderie if you don't have your teammates in the locker room with you or in the weight room with you, things like that. So I think that's really just a big takeaway from this summer. It's just everybody's excited to get started. Fall season starts here next week, I guess in just a couple of days, and now everybody's actually getting to be together, which is just an awesome thing to see. So I think it's really exciting in Chatham County sports this year.
Yeah, and I've noticed too. The team started practicing. The football team started practicing a couple of weeks ago. They had pads this week, and yesterday evening, actually, Northwood had their Jack Shaner was a coach and teacher at Northwood. A big thing going on, and all the Northwood schools. Well, Chatham Charter was not there. Chatham Central was there. Jordan Matthews was there, and Seaforth wasn't there. We'll talk about Seaforth a little bit. Successful event, an idea of what folks are doing. A lot of folks. I think JAM's actually got a new football team.
They do. Ryan Johnson. I've been talking to him the last couple of days. He seems like he's ready to go. I actually talked to him 2 hours ago, and he's just after they had 2 scrimmages this week, and he's just fired up. He actually got hired. I think his official start date was 15 days before the season's supposed to begin. So I mean, he's just raring to go. I mean, he's just trying to catch up on everything. But I mean, he's a really good guy, and he's a former JM alum, and we did a story on him last week. But he's ready to go. And I kind of want to know from you. I mean, what kind of was the atmosphere over there at the Jamboree last night? I didn't get to go. We had a couple boots on the ground over there, but I was not actually there. So
yeah, I saw your guys out there. Interesting, because actually the first they did sessions, and each session 10 plays, and then they switched. So you did 10 plays on offense, 10 plays on defense, 3-minute segments, and then you did a situational thing. You could, hey, we're going to go 4 tries to the end zone. JM, it was interesting because I put up a video on our YouTube site, on the Chatham Journal YouTube site, where he spent a couple minutes after that first session talking about, you mentioned he's an alumni, so they talked about JM pride and JM effort. I think his first session was, look, guys, brand new season. We're doing this. This is an opportunity well, and I want you to kick it up a step because you're going to, well, they went up against Northwood as well, and we've got videos of that up as these days. And things were going well. I'm just looking because my dog's misbehaving over there. But it's interesting because I don't know what your about him is, but his feeling is we're Jordan Mendes. We have a proud football history, and you guys need to play up to that level. I think one of the lines he said is, "You're education, but you're not owed to play sport." And I just have to toss up. I'm going to learn to put my dog outside when I do this kind of stuff. What's your impressions of the coach?
Yeah, I think that's kind of one thing he was kind of saying to me too is, I think he played on James' football team 21 years ago. I think he was a graduate of the class of 2000. So for him to be back, I mean, he's been all around, the state at this point since he graduated. I think he was in, Burlington. I think he went to Northmore. I know he's been in Cummings the last few years, which is, one of the teams in JM's new conference. But you can just tell, I think he really does have this sense of pride about him. I think if I remember correctly, they haven't had a winning season since 2011. So it's been, at this point, it's been 10 years since JM's actually had a winning over 500 season. And I think I'm obviously not in the business of making predictions or anything like that, but it sounds like he's really trying to drum up, interest in the program. I think that's going well. He sounds really excited about some of the guys he's got, especially on offense. I think he's got a couple of really good, versatile players on offense that he told me about earlier today. And I think I think if there's one guy who can turn it around, he feels like one of those guys. So I don't want to, put too much pressure on him or anything like that. I don't think the program's going to turn around tomorrow. I mean, they didn't have a win last season. I think they were 0-7 last season. So, I mean, obviously it's going to, there's going to be some growing pains, things like that. But he seems like he really could, be part of the reason why they can turn this thing around. And I think the biggest thing with JM and the biggest issue that's been, the problem for years, and especially last year, is just the interest in the program has not necessarily been there. I think the numbers haven't really been there. So I think he's starting to finally see an uptick in those numbers. And I think they're actually probably going to have a JM or a JV team this season, which is something they haven't had a couple of years in the past. So I think it's looking good over there in JM. I'm excited to get to a couple games this year and cover them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree a lot with your assessment. I think from what I saw yesterday, it's a jamboree. It's you're just trying different things. There were some good points, again, some bad points. I wasn't able to hear his post last session, but we do have some video clips out there. Just go to YouTube, search Jordan Matthews High School Football, and you'll find it. You can take a look at it, and they're doing different things. Speaking about JV, do you know if North's having a JV team this year? Because Seaforth, there were a lot of folks that went to Seaforth, and Seaforth's only playing JV this year. They're only playing JV this year, and they only have freshmen and sophomores. So, do you know anything? Well, what?
I talked to Coach Mocha yesterday afternoon before the Jamboree, and it seems like he mentioned that there was something about JV, but I don't exactly know. I think they've still got a good amount of numbers. I think Seaforth definitely dipped into those numbers a little bit, but as of right now, I think there's a plan to have JV. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's the plan right now.
Yeah, folks, and I just want to say you can fact check us. There's still a lot of things that are moving, and again, with this year, last year was COVID. This year, we've got a brand new high school, Seaforth, who's taken a bunch of freshmen and sophomores out. I do know I ran into a couple of parents. I've gone to some of the Seaforth practices. There's some parents who opted to go over to Seaforth, and I know at least two parents whose kids were going to Woods Charter School because they don't have a football program. They've opted to go with their kids at Seaforth to play football, so they're going to be there. And if I'm not mistaken, the coach at Seaforth is one of the former assistant coaches at Northwood. Is that correct?
Yeah, Terrence Gary. I know he did a lot of special team stuff over there at Northwood. I think he's another one that I'm really excited to see how he coaches the guys, especially being in JV, kind of dropping down a little bit. But then I think I talked to him for. I have a series out called The Clipboard, where every single week I talk to a local coach. And I think last week I spoke to 3 Seaforth coaches, and he was one of them. And one of the things he was basically telling me was like, you know what, it is kind of weird to just have JV right now, but we didn't really feel safe, putting freshmen and sophomores against, high level, juniors and seniors and stuff every single Friday night. They just didn't feel comfortable with that. But he did say with them playing, start on JV early and things like that, I think he's really excited to see how this team grows up. And he basically said by the time these guys are like juniors and seniors, Seaforth is going to be a school to reckon with. And I kind of believe him. I think he's another guy that's just super excited to go. And I think that's the thing about Chatham County specifically is this is a county that has a really, big time sports culture, and all the coaches seem to just love what they do. And it's really fun for, people like, me and Eugene to be able to talk to these coaches and kind of, pick their brains a little bit and see what makes them tick and see why they're so excited. And I think, again, all of the Seaforth coaches really, but I know Terrence Carey is one of the biggest ones, just like really hyped up for what happens next week.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, and I know some of the parents, because I actually taught Coach Amy, who's the athletic director over at Seaforth. The expectations, some parents may go, oh my gosh, we're going to get our brains kicked out. But the thing is, for folks who have been in this area long enough, they have to remember, for example, Carborough High School, the same thing. They started off, they were freshmen and sophomores. I know there was one game that they played against Northwood where the third string Northwood, the third stringers on the Northwood football team were just kicking, can I say snot? I guess I can. Kicking the snot out of the Carborough team. The Carborough moms were upset about it, and Paul at that time said, look, I can tell my third stringers not to play hard because they're not going to get to play a lot during the regular season. So for the folks at Seaforth, I will tell you just from experience, it may be a hard 1 or 2 years down the road, but as Victor said, come junior and senior year, it's going to put in a good position. And I think when I talked to Coach Amy, he said that actually next year, when they're going to have freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, he's expecting to move them into the varsity side, where they're going to not just be playing JV, they're going to be doing varsity, because except for football this year, in fact, all the other sports teams are playing varsity. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think, again, this is a brand new school. It's brand new programs across the board. So I think there's it's hard to have, super big expectations for them, especially with them being, just, first and second year players essentially. But I think there's a lot to be excited about with that. I think in a lot of sports that is going to help them, kind of, I guess, get their ground a little bit is to come out here and immediately start playing some of these upperclassmen, people in basketball and volleyball and stuff like that. To come out here and play against that competition, and to have what some other, freshmen, sophomores don't get to do on JV. So they're coming out here, and who knows if they're going to do super well in any of the sports this year. I have a feeling they will, because there's a lot of really, really good athletes out there. But it's just the fact that they're going to get that experience that early in their careers, which is amazing. And I know me and Eugene followed a lot of Northwood basketball last year. And, the biggest storyline from Northwood basketball last year was there's these 3 freshmen who are really, 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 really good. And they essentially, along with some senior leadership and stuff like that, but they essentially led them to the state championship last year. So there's really no reason why in all these sports, freshmen and sophomores can't compete and can't, lead these teams to, I don't know if I'm going to say state championship level, this year, the first year that they're even in school, but there's no reason why they couldn't lead them far and get the programs off to a good start. So And one of those basketball players for Northwood is actually going to Seaforth, and Jared Stevenson, whose parents are the coaches over there, which is going to be really exciting to see too. So I think there's some hope over there at Seaforth anyway. I think it's exciting. Anytime you start a new school, it's exciting. So who knows? I'm just ready to see what they do. But I think there's some room for optimism over there. Some reasons you should be optimistic.
Yeah, let's swerve off of football a little bit because you brought something up. Both you and I covered the basketball, and they got to the championship game, lost the championship game. As you said, you had the 3 freshmen, you had 2 or 3 seniors that kind of led that team. And one of those sophomores moving over to Seaforth, as you said, Stevenson. Do you know if the other 2 freshmen are moving, or are they going to be sophomores? Are they staying at Northwood?
As far as I know, they're staying at Northwood. Haven't heard anything about them not being there.
All right.
So I know Drake for sure is going to be there, and I think Fred Whitaker is also going to be there.
Yeah, and they've all 3 of them been playing summer basketball, haven't they?
Yeah, they've done a lot of good stuff. They actually did a tournament down in South Carolina with a lot of really big schools. They did one. I can't remember where it was in North Carolina, but they played a whole bunch of schools from around the state. Coach Brown over there is really making sure that they get some experience. I think that they obviously had a ton of experience, going all the way to the state championship, which is huge. But being able to come out here this summer, once again, have an off season, and then come out here and play some of the best teams across North Carolina and South Carolina, that's only going to make them better. So, we'll obviously talk a little bit more about them, as the winter approaches. But I'm really, really pumped for those guys. And I you know what? I don't want to say it too early, Gene, but they could be state champions. We'll see. We'll talk about it. We'll see.
Well, I will tell you an interesting thing. Since some of the ACC sports writers who cover the ACC, have started paying attention to what's going on in the basketball scene here in Chatham County. And I actually heard one of them tell me that he wouldn't be surprised if you saw some college coaches showing up at the games, not just at Northwood, but also at Seaforth. Let me ask you this question. Northwood right now is 3A. You've had a reorganization. The conferences every few years change around. Seaforth being a brand new school, and because their numbers is 2, I believe if I'm not mistaken, they have Chatham Central in that conference as well as Jordan Matthews. Is that correct? And how do you see that helping Seaforth this year? And do you think it's going to hurt Northwood still being in 3A with a lower population, or that's not really going to make too much of a difference?
Yeah, I think to touch on Northwood a little bit, I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. I think they're actually going to be helped. I think their conference, for example, for football, I know Western, I think it's Eastern Alamance, are both in their conference. They're both pretty good at football, things like that. But overall, there's a lot of teams that were in their conference before that moved up to 4A. I know Chapel Hill's one of them, I believe. And then there's a couple schools in their conference that moved up. So I think that's going to help them a little bit because they're not going to have too much competition, I think, in that conference. So I think Northwood really could end up benefit from this realignment. And kind of the same thing with Seaforth, honestly. The thing about Seaforth's conference is it's a 1A, 2A split conference. So I know there's a couple of 1A schools, I think Chatham Central included, that are going to be in that conference. So when it comes time to pick spots for playoff spots and things like that, it's going to be there's going to be less competition because half the conference is 1A, or I think it's 2 schools or 1A, then 5 or 6 or whatever is 2A. And so I think that's going to help Seaforth a little bit. But honestly, I'm just excited to see how Seaforth does it. Kind of like you mentioned, 3-4 years down the line here. I know around that time would be time for realignment again. But I'm just ready to see Seaforth compete against Jordan Matthews. I'm ready to see Jordan Matthews compete against Chatham Central. This is not something that we've had, at least since I've been here. I've only been here since January, but the last few years, all these schools, Jordan Matthews in a separate conference, Chatham Central is in a separate conference, Northwood is in a separate conference. The only thing we've really had is Woods Charter and Chatham Charter are in the same conference. Which has always been cool, but now we finally get to see a lot of these schools go head to head and take on each other. I know for football, I think JM's playing Northwood week 2 maybe. So I think that's really exciting for anybody who is a fan of Chatham County sports to actually see these teams play against each other. Besides one matchup a year in one sport. It's just really exciting to see. And I think Seaforth included is just going to be, really, really fun to watch. And I think they're going to benefit a lot from this conference because I don't think it's the strongest conference in the world. So I think there really is an opening for Seaforth to kind of get in there and establish some dominance in some sports anyway. So I'm ready to see what they do over there.
I'm personally looking forward to the Seaforth versus Northwood games. I know Seaforth's coming over to Northwood on Monday. I think that's 4:30. They're having a scrimmage in tennis. Again, except for the freshmen, the kids at Seaforth know the kids at Northwood. The Northwood kids know the Seaforth kids. I think they could be a really good and healthy competition between two schools. Again, Coach Amy, who's the AD, was the AD with Coach Cameron over at Northwood. Now Coach Amy is at Seaforth earlier this week, and he had mentioned that Cameron had been over there with Blake, and they were checking out. And, some of those facility upgrades that they or new facilities that they have at Seaforth would like to see some upgrades as well, but we're not going to get into that in this discussion. Feeling just, it sounds like what you're saying is more high schools see in the entire Chatham County.
Yeah, no, it definitely will, for sure. I mean, because like I said, this is not something that we usually get to see, at least since I've been in Chatham County and been, really into Chatham County sports. I've seen really the only matchups I've really seen is, once again, Woods Charter and Chatham Charter. And I know Chatham Charter will sometimes play like maybe a JM occasionally in some sports, but then JM and Chatham Central might play because they're, big rivals, big inter-county rivals in a couple of different sports. But, I mean, to actually see them, especially with three teams in one conference competing against each other for the conference title and things like that, like that's awesome to see. Like this is what, like, for example, the Pac-7 that JM was in up until this year, over the last couple of years, that's been almost all Randolph County schools. So if you were a Randolph County sports fan, which I grew up in Trinity, I'm a Trinity alum. They're not the best at any sports. They're okay here and there. But at the end of the day, like, that was a Randolph County conference. You got to see a ton of Randolph County matchups every single week, and it's really cool to see because you grow to like have it. Especially if you go to one of those schools or are a fan of one of those schools, you get to like have this really big rivalry with some of these schools in your county, right? But we haven't really gotten to see that. I think even the JM and Chatham Central rivalry is kind of dipped off in some sports because they just don't play enough. And so I think finally they're going to have that competition again. Seaforth is now going to hop into the mix and have that competition. And then obviously I think they're going to try and get, Seaforth and Northwood to play a lot, kind of like you said. I mean, they open on Monday with tennis against each other. And I know they're playing a couple of other sports maybe next week against each other too. So having kind of like that Pittsburgh rivalry between Northwood and Seaforth is really cool to see too. So, I mean, it's just awesome because instead of being able to see some of these, seeing Northwood have to play, East Chapel Hill every single week, it seems like you actually get to see them maybe play Seaforth here and there. Actually get to see some of these kids who did, go to school together, now are kind of pitted against each other, unlike the Jared Stevens of the world playing against the Drake Powells of the world, stuff like that. I think that kind of thing is just going to be, frankly, it's just going to be fun. And it's just going to be really awesome for fans to see. You're going to get to see more of those rivalries drum up a little bit. And I think that is one of the only things that we're missing here in Chatham County is just that really big inter-county rivalry. And now we're finally starting to get that. And I'm just really excited for it.
You had mentioned you had talked to some of the coaches. I think you mentioned you talked with PJ, who's a coach, and who else did you talk to, and what's the sense that you got? Because when I also talked to PJ, and his sense is, and he actually played tennis for UNC, and he coached at, I think, Cardinal Gibbons, and he's come over here because it's only 15 minutes away from home. He's enthusiastic about the crowd the freshmen and the sophomores that he has. And again, I think he set the expectation with parents that, hey, first year of the program, but as long as your kids try their best, there's nothing but upside. What's your sense talking to the coaches, and which coaches have you talked to at Seaforth?
Yeah, so in my clipboard series last week, we talked to Terrence Gary, the football coach, PJ Petraz, the tennis coach, and Giovanni Viana, the soccer coaches, or the soccer coach for both men's and women's. And PJ is also coach of men's and women's tennis. And honestly, talking to all three of them was just amazing. I do want to shout out Giovanni too, because that guy's career has been just illustrious. He coached, I think he is Brazilian, and he also coached in Brazil. I think he interned with one of the biggest soccer teams in Brazil, one of the biggest professional soccer teams in Brazil. And he's coached all over the place, multiple states, multiple countries, both Brazil and the U.S. And he's got like 25 years of experience, I think, something like that. And I think he honestly, if there's one coach at Seaforth, I think that really could potentially come out with a contender from the get-go, it's him. He told me a story, actually. He coached at Newberry College in Massachusetts, right? And he said that he coached, I think it was a women's team, and when he got there, they only had 5 players on the roster. Like, that was it. You can't field a soccer team with 5 players, right? And so he, recruited, and eventually, by the time it was time for the season to start, he had, I don't know the exact number, but he had enough to field a team, and they ended up going, I think, to the quarterfinals or semifinals of the tournament there. Whatever tournament that is for Newberry. So, I mean, that's right there. He just shows you that he can come out, barely have any players on the roster, and come out and all of a sudden, put together a contender, which is mind-boggling to me. So I think he's one guy who I think can really come out there and do that for Seaforth, which is really exciting on the men's soccer side of things, because obviously you've got Paul Quadros over there at JM, illustrious coach. He's been there for 20 years, I think. I think it's 20 years now to the day, basically, is how long he's been coaching soccer over there. Not to the day, but to the year. And so those two, Seaforth and JM, being in the same conference, getting to see those two match up is really going to be awesome, because they both got extreme soccer knowledge. Like, it's insane when you talk to those guys, how passionate they are about soccer. And then you talked about PJ. He's awesome. He's a really fun guy. And really, it just seems like to me, all these coaches at Seaforth, every Seaforth coach I've talked to, including Coach Amy, who's AD over there, like you mentioned, all of those coaches are just fun. They really seem to care about the kids, really care about the school. And one thing I've heard from all three of those coaches, and any other coaches I've even said, a few words to, have been, we just want to go ahead and start off this legacy here at Seaforth and build a legacy here at Seaforth, and want people, 10 years from now, these kids to be able to tell, some of their relatives and things like that. Like, hey, do you remember when I was, the first team over there at Seaforth that did this and this and this? And it's just like, and help build that program. And it's just, I mean, it's just really cool to see that Jason Amy's kind of put together this staff of coaches that just care so much about the county, care so much about the school, and just want everyone there to succeed. It's just amazing. So I'm really excited to see Seaforth, move forward and see what they're going to do this year, because I know it's going to be, especially in a few years from now, I think they're really going to be, taken off as a program in just so many different sports.
Yeah, it's you were talking about coaches. They had an introduction. We've got the video up on our YouTube channel. Introduced all the coaches. There seems to be, again, it's a new school, so there's a high level of enthusiasm. But they've got coaches who have history with Chatham County. I know some of the coaches there went to school in Chatham County schools. Some of them have played sports here in Chatham County. That's interesting to see. The neat thing about it too is you got Coach Amy at Seaforth, you got Coach Cameron at Northwood, and even though they help each other out. For example, Anna, I think Murs, her last name, she's the athletic trainer there. She, actually, Coach Cameron introduced her to Coach Amy, and he went ahead and hired her. And she's actually in Northwood to talk to the athletic trainer there to get information from them. So even though they're going to be in competition, they're working together to do the best thing they can for the kids. And the facilities there are neat. We've got a video, a drone shot of just the outdoor facilities. The soccer fields are looking great. They still need to do some work. And again, first year, and if folks who know, most fields take a couple years just to get to a mature state. So, but I'll tell you what, the football stadium grass looks good, and they can fit, I think, 2,000 people in that facility. Anything else about Seaforth that you can think of that folks need to know that you've found or gotten information about?
Not necessarily. I think there's a whole lot of question marks at this point. But I think it is, like I said, I keep saying this word, but it is going to be exciting once things really start kicking off over there and getting started, and seeing where these programs go. I do want to touch on just real quick, kind of that symbiotic relationship between like Northwood and Seaforth, because you would think that there would maybe be even some bitterness with Northwood about Seaforth coming in, stealing a couple of their kids, if you want to call it stealing. Just getting a couple of their athletes that they may have wanted to go forth at Northwood and be stars at Northwood, I guess. But there is no bitterness. Like you mentioned, Coach Vernon and Coach Amy have both had great relationships. They worked together at Northwood for a long time. And I think that's one thing you see in a lot of Chatham County schools, is that there really isn't any kind of bitterness or hatefulness or anything. Maybe fans might not like each other some of the time. Athletes may not love each other some of the time. But like the schools themselves, like I know some of the coaches at JM. I remember, for example, the first I think it was like the first Chatham County basketball game I ever went to was Chatham Central and JM. And these are these big rivals and everything. And the coaches before the game were just like, they've both been there for a while. They were just like talking, laughing with each other, talking about like things that happened 10 years ago, stuff like that. And it was just awesome to see, like, these are two guys who, are going against each other all the time, yet they still like have this love for each other. And it's just like, I see that in so many different sports for so many different schools. And I think that's just one of the benefits of Chatham County. And I think in other counties, you don't exactly get that. Like there is some spitefulness with some of the schools and things like that, but there's just none of that here. So even though obviously, on the field, on the court, whatever, you're competing a little bit. These schools at the end of the day do want to help each other out. They want to see each other succeed. And I think that's just really cool to see.
We're at the half hour. I thought we'd go about half hour. If you don't mind, do you mind if we run over a little bit? Because I think, again, we've done pretty good covering Northwood, touching on JM, talking a bunch about Seaforth, again, because they're a brand new school. Chatham Central, what's your sense on what's going on in Chatham Central over Bear Creek?
It's always fun stuff going on in Chatham Central. It's always a fun place to cover events and things like that. I think football wise, I know that's one of the biggest things. And last year was just not their year. The year before wasn't their year either. I think last year I think they played 4 games. They were 1-3. But they had a lot of COVID issues, things like that. So I'm hoping this year they actually get to have a full season, see what they can really do, what Coach Howes over there can do. I'm really excited to see that. But they're going to be without some guys, some seniors. I know Michael Moore is the biggest guy. He was probably the biggest athlete in Chatham County at least last season, with what he was able to do. He's now going to be playing Division I basketball over there at App State. He just announced that a week or so ago. So that's really cool to see too. But I mean, overall, I think Chatham Central always has a little bit of a cool look about it. I love Chatham Central because that place and Bear Creek as a whole, it just has this gritty atmosphere to it. I don't know what it is about it. So I know one thing I loved covering, one of my favorite things to cover last year was actually Chatham Central tennis. And I know their women's team was really good. Their men's team was phenomenal last year. The men's team went undefeated in the regular season last year. But the women's tennis team, starting up here next week, I think that's actually going to be a really cool thing to watch. They lost a couple of seniors, but I'm really excited to see what they got cooking over there. And I don't know. I think Bear Creek's always fun, and I think they're gonna have some competitors. I know in golf is the same way. So I don't know. I think Bear Creek's going, and they're just gonna do whatever they're gonna do. They're gonna do their own thing. But I'm excited to see a couple of sports over there this year.
All right. I think I wrote out a brief agenda that we had talked about. We've gotten down towards the end. Folks, I do want to let you know, and I've talked a bit about I think sports coverage in Chatham County is important. I think a lot of people are interested in what their kids are doing, what their friends' kids are doing in sports. The neat thing about Victor is, as you can tell in the last half hour of this, he enjoys what he does, enjoys covering the stuff. I enjoy what I do. I'm more of a photography. I used to just do still pictures, but now you can't just do stills. You got to do video. So I shoot video, because if I don't shoot video, it's Mr. Galin, did you shoot some video? I'm like, yes, I've shot some video. But the thing about Victor is every Wednesday by the afternoon, the Chatham News and Record comes out. So let's give Victor a plug in here. Victor, tell us a little bit. I didn't even know about the clipboard. See, I kind of took the summer off. Tell us about some of the stuff that you've got going on coming up for next. If you don't mind, tell us what you got coming up for next Wednesday's issue. Tell us a little bit more about the clipboard. I know I ran into your guys' photographer yesterday at the Jamboree Northwood. Oh, before we go on to that, there was a Jamboree in Cary that Seaforth went to. Do you know anything about what went on there?
I have not got to talk to anybody else about that.
Right. Folks, don't worry about it. We'll get to it. Victor's going to tell you about what he's got coming up in the paper. And then, folks, what I want to ask you is, if you like what Victor and I are doing, let us know, because if there's an interest in this, we will. I mean, I'm willing to do it. If Victor's willing to do it, we're willing to do this maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks to get folks knowing what's knowing. Because Victor does Chatham County sports pretty much all day, every day during the work week. And he's the writer. He looks at things from a different angle than I do because I'm just the photographer. But I think in this last half hour, you've gotten loads of information. So, Victor, what you got coming up on Wednesday, and tell us more about what you're doing with the paper. And just look, if you guys want coverage, if you want pictures of your kids that you have on newspaper print that you can actually cut out and put on your refrigerator, the Chatham News and Record is where you need to go.
I appreciate that, man. I really do. Yeah, I mean, this week, per usual, is just a lot of stuff coming up. I won't give away everything just now or just yet, but I know a lot of football stuff. We're gonna have football previews for mainly for JM, Chatham Central, and Northwood, all three varsity football programs. We're gonna have a coverage of the Jamboree from Friday, which is from what I've heard from Gene and from a couple of my guys have been was really cool, really awesome to see. And the biggest thing, kind of like Gene mentioned, is we've got a ton of great photos coming out. I always want to shout out our photographers because the art in there is always phenomenal. I know I'm just the writer. I'm not really the visual guy, but they really kill it. I know Simon Barbary. I want to give a shout out to him because he was at the Jamboree. So and I've already seen some pictures from the Jamboree. They were fantastic. So check those out for sure. We've also got some stuff about ACC football coming up. We've got the clipboard, kind of like you mentioned, which has been a series I've done for about 3 weeks now. This week is actually going to be Cameron Eisenhower from Northwood, which I know we've spent a lot of time with him. And that's kind of one thing we didn't really mention on here was cross country, which is a really, really awesome sport that's coming out. I know we also didn't really mention a lot about volleyball, but both of those things coming out this week or coming out next week. And so, yeah, that's kind of a couple of the stories that we've got for next week, got tabbed for next week. A couple other things that I'm working on as well that I won't spoil just yet. And then also the last thing I kind of wanted to shout out was that we're actually getting ready to do a sports newsletter. I'm not exactly sure the date that's going to come out. When the first issue is going to hit your inbox, but if you want to get some more information about that, get the rundown on the scores for the week, any of the big stories we're working on, anything like that, any of the big photos that we have, our favorite photos of the week, you're going to want to check out the sports newsletter that's going to be coming soon. So just go to chathamnewsrecord.com. Hit me up on Twitter, hit our sports Twitter account up, things like that. You can find us on a lot of different places. So we appreciate any readers we have, anything like that. So I think there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up, and I'm excited to share with you guys.
All right, folks. Yeah, there you go. Victor's Twitter account at FreeZeal33. We've got the Chatham Journal Twitter account for sports, Chatham NC Sports. You got the Chatham News and Record Twitter account for sports, which is Chatham and Sports. Again, you've got Victor out there. And, hey, folks, thank you so much for listening. Oh, I also want to give a shout-out to Simon. He and I were out there shooting at sports, and the way they do the Jamboree is one half of the field's got two teams going, the other half of the field's two teams going, and I finally convinced Simon to come out to the 50 line and stand in between the two scrimmages and put his life on line, because I said this is the only opportunity that you're going to be able to on the field when there's action going on the field. So I'm sure he's got good pictures. We've got good pictures too. Check out the Chatham Journal Facebook page. That's where we have the pictures. The YouTube, we've got some video clips. Look, I run and gun. I don't do a lot of editing, and they're just put together. Maybe you can see your favorite player, your kid's favorite friend, or whomever out there. But, folks, listen, we enjoyed doing that. I know I enjoyed doing it. I hope Victor enjoyed doing it. And let us know if you like this, because if you do, we'll do more stuff. I think the newsletter that Victor's talking about is great. That's an opportunity to get your news right there into your email, because there's stuff going on every day that you can't always get into weekly print publication. But look, if you like it, then we'll do more of it. Anything else, Victor?
I think that's it. Just go out next week. I want everybody, if they can, if they're able, go out and enjoy at least one sporting event, because I mean, it's nice to have things back, and we need to support these kids because they're working hard this summer. So I'm just excited. That's it. I'm just ready to go.
Right, and if it's an outdoor event, just a reminder, Chatham County Schools policy, if you're outdoor, you don't need to wear a mask. It's only if you're indoors that you need to. So there's plenty of room, plenty of space, and the weather's been great so far. Victor, thanks for doing this, folks. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll be doing this another week or two again. Thanks, Victor.